Is this the twerking thing? I'll throw my back out with that. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How we doing? We're already then? Oh, man. Welcome to day 2 of SkyDogCON. And, wow, I got my coffee. You're drinking water, Billy. That's going to scare you. Hydrating, or is it just that you're hydrating? Good plan, good plan. So, anyhow, so next up is Billy Hoffman, a gentleman I've known for quite some time. I believe you were not old enough to drink when I first met you, but you were old enough to get a cease and desist sent to a hotel on a Saturday, which was pretty incredible. So Billy's has done quite a few things in his life to get some attention, from circumventing security to circumventing security. One trick pony. That's it. So he started a venture called Zoomph for web optimization, and he's come back to give us another edition of startup lessons that they've learned. And he's also joined by Mark Isham, who is his CEO. Heaven help him. And so anyhow, they're going to come up here and give us the update on what they've been up to with some good lessons. So, gentlemen.
Thank you. Hello. We should just learn everybody's names since we could.
Yeah, it's great to speak to all 5 of you today, so
That's
thanks
right.
for coming.
Thank you, Ski Boy.
It's going to go viral on YouTube, though. I can see
obviously.
It. Good
With our dashing good looks, of course. Hi, so I'm Billy. And wow, that's a slower transition. And I started a company called Zoomph, and I've talked about it before, and I quickly realized that I suck at a lot of things, and I desperately needed some help. And I eventually convinced somebody to come help me do that. That's Mark.
I'm Mark. It always kind of cracks me up to see the CEO title. We have 3 people in the company, so it sounds very big and impressive.
4
but,
now, I guess.
3.5 if you
yeah.
count that. But really, I'm the guy who said not it last, I guess. So, so well done, well played on that, Billy, well played. But I'm probably this is my first hacker conference, actually.
Yes.
This is Billy's 530th, I'm
It's a
sure.
lot.
So we actually represent the extreme ends of the spectrum here. So be gentle on me, but be harsh on Billy because he deserves it.
Yes.
But
go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, so we've learned a lot over the last year, and there's a lot of lessons that we wanted to learn. So like Billy mentioned, Billy started up a company to focus on web performance optimization. Started about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I joined about 9 months ago, and there's a lot of good and a lot of bad, and we thought people who would ever have inklings of starting their own company might be interested in this, and apparently not a lot of people have inklings of starting their own company.
It's early. We'll see what happens.
They've received the message.
Is that going to show us our notes?
No, it isn't.
Oh, okay.
The notes are right here.
Good. All right. Well, you're driving this one then, buddy.
So, we always get a crack out of this, right? I think, who knows what this is from? Hopefully everyone in the audience knows what this one's from.
Underwear Pants Gnomes from South Park.
Oh, you just gave away the answer.
Were we going to give them something for getting it? I don't know.
Pat in the back.
Well,
So I think right now we've collected the underpants. Profit, not quite yet, unless you count like our very meager salaries and lean cuisine lifestyle. Maybe profit counts, but we're in the question mark zone, a little bit deep into the question mark zone. So Billy did a lot of underpants collecting before I joined. So we're not going to ask.
It's
how
not
we
a web
did that,
performance
where you got
optimization
that
company.
from,
It's
but,
underpants.
We have a lot of underpants now, so we have to find a way to sell it.
The funny thing kind of that people have about startups is that they might have an idea, right? Collect underpants. And they might have some concept that they'd like to do, whatever that is, for a living. But how? How do they do that? Like, what does it mean to take an idea and actually build a company out of it? And that's normally a big question mark. And so really what we'd like to do with this presentation is show you what we've learned by doing this. What's in that question mark? The question mark, Mark and I were kind of talking about this. The question mark is interesting because if you knew what was inside that question mark, you would run. Like, nobody would willingly do this unless you are a little crazy, I think.
They already ran. So.
Yes, exactly. But the real key here is actually not knowing what's in that question mark is good, right? Because who here has ever played GoldenEye on the N64 or any of that stuff? Rare. Rare is a game company, and they basically created the concept of first-person shooters on a console. And they went in saying, we had no idea how hard this was going to be. We did it because nobody told us that we couldn't. And they have some crazy examples about how they never tested stuff and they did this and this. So, we're going to try to explain what's in that question mark in actually creating a company. But, it's, as you learn about it, don't forget that it's going to seem hard and it's scary, but at the same time, it's also not as bad and scary as you might think.
The dream. So I think we all know the dream. Of course, there's a lot more dreamers since the social network came out, but we've seen them all before that as well, right? It's like, oh my God, I have this great product idea. I'm going to build a social big data platform that mines Twitter for
synergistic buzzword, mobile,
over Magento, right?
Pivoting.
And it's going to be huge.
Yes.
Energy in the cloud.
In the cloud.
Right. In the cloud. I forgot the cloud. Yes, in the cloud.
And you build the product in your dorm room over the weekend, and you're Mark Zuckerberg at this point. So it's if only that was true, right? It's a lot harder than that. Building the product is the fun part.
Yes.
The execution is the hard part, right? And that's I know the Facebook movie definitely dissed the Winklevoss twins a lot for that, right? It's like, we have the idea, you owe us a lot of money. It's like, well, the idea is really the easy part, right? It's executing it that's the hard part.
Yeah, there's this idea that, ideas are valuable. Ideas aren't valuable, and you can prove this. Go out on the street and be like, I have an idea. I will sell it to you for $1. Can't tell you what the idea is unless you sign this NDA first, but I have an idea and I'd like to sell it to you for $1. You will never have anybody give you $1, right? Maybe just to have you shut up and go away, or they think that you're a homeless person. Ideas don't really matter. It's the execution. And what you find out is that the reality of doing a startup, execution is not writing code and then having a bunch of people do stuff. Like, in fact, if you're doing this right, about 10% of what you're doing is working on whatever your product is, right? Whether it's a physical good or it's software or there's some type of engineering involved. Very little of your time is actually going to be spent doing that, which is tough because when you're a hacker or you're very technically focused, you like to do one thing and you like to make this. I'm going to make this kick-ass piece of software and I'm going to open source it and everybody loves it and this is all that I do. But when you try to convert that to a company, you realize that if you're really, really good at that, it doesn't matter because there's 90% other stuff. And that you can be incredibly awesome at that one piece, but it's only 10%. And so no matter how good you are at that, if you can't do even a little bit of the other stuff, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I definitely learned this lesson the hard way. So I started about 9 months joining Billy, and I came from a stale corporate job, like I'm sure all of us are either in or have had in the past, right? And I was pretty excited, like, oh my God, I get to code again for once, right? I went down the evil path of management and software for a while, and I got really tired of that. And just like the talk last night, I wanted to get back into coding just because I kind of wanted to see if I still could, right, after these years. So I got very excited about that, but I probably spent about 10% of my time coding, and I feel guilty about it too. I mean, coding, I code on the weekends and the evenings because I feel like I'm neglecting what needs to be done for the business during the day if I do that otherwise. So there's so much like like it shows here. I mean, a lot of it's networking, right? Just meeting people, growing your network, trying to get introductions into good companies like you see here. Invoicing, promoting, self-promotion, we'll talk about that a lot, right? Spending a lot of time on LinkedIn trying to get people who might have a connection to your product and just kind of scratching your head. I mean, we do a lot of conference calls, just out of our houses and on our laptops, and that's the reality, right? There's a lot of that work just promoting the company and just trying to get some traction with the business.
So as we said, your new life, like typically people who are very technical are not very social, and that's something you have to get over immediately. Now, based on what I saw last night, if you throw a little bit of beer into the mix, none of you have problems being social at all. So luckily, a lot of these mixers schedule for the ones in the evening, because then that will help you. But a lot of it is, it's everybody always talks about like, oh, it's the good old boy network. People buy products from people that they know. Well, that's largely true. And it's just if you think about it, if you are like the purchasing guy at some company and there's all these people who have a product that can fit your needs, you're going to buy from the one that maybe you have a connection with. Or maybe you can't even necessarily get into that company to present what you have unless you know people there and you get a referral. So a lot of your life is spent talking with people, meeting with people, and just trying to leverage everybody that you know. And that sounds bad, right? Leverage is like a highfalutin way of saying use, but it's not really using it. It's in everybody's best interest, because the person you're talking to, they're going to come to you someday and want some help or an introduction somewhere.
Yeah, and it's really making friends, right? And this is, I think Billy and I think everyone in this room shares the same probably distaste for the word networking, right? It sounds sleazy, right? You're trying to get something out of somebody else for your benefit. And if you approach it that way, people see through that. They won't give you anything of benefit because they see you as a scumbag, right, and a slime ball. And it's not the culture that we want in our company, right? And it's not the culture that succeeds in business. It's really just making friends and establishing that connection with someone. So over time, if they have a problem that you can help you with, you do that, right? And vice versa. And then over time, that connection grows into potentially business partnerships down the road.
I'll give you a great example. Actually, in Atlanta, there's a pretty cool space called the Atlanta Tech Village, which is basically a office building that is devoted exclusive. The person who bought it made a lot of money through startups and essentially has created almost kind of like Y Combinator without being Y Combinator, right? It's more of the support structure. So it's office spaces and advisors, and it's just trying to get a lot of people together that are doing startups, and that the idea being that they will help each other. And we don't have office space inside the ATV, but we work a lot with those people there. They're our friends. Some of them are funded. Some of them are bootstrapping themselves. Some of them probably could pay for our product. Some of them definitely can't. But just this past week, I was sitting down with the CTO of one of those companies and walking them through some issues we found with one of their landing pages. And they were like, hey, this is awesome. What are you hoping to get out of this? And he was trying to kind of figure out what our angle was, right? That's the whole networking. Are you being sleazy? And it was like, look, we just want to have a good relationship with you guys. You're a startup in Atlanta. We're a startup in Atlanta. We're going to bump into each other a lot. Let's both be on good terms. And that happens quite a bit. Next.
Yeah, let's go next. So, of course, here's the flip side, and we suffered this trap too. I know I especially did when I started back in January. Is your time is the most valuable asset in your company, right? By far, especially when you're not making a lot of money, right? You have to spend that time wisely, and you can go to networking events 7 nights a week, 2 times a day if you wanted to, and it's just going to suck your soul alive if you do that. You're not going to move the business forward at all if you're doing that. So you have to use your time wisely. You have to be smart about the events you choose, right? You have to make sure that you're going to learn something, or you think you're going to make some meaningful connections, or like this, you have a good group of friends where you want to just kind of catch up and share some value. So you definitely have to balance that. We went a little overboard. I think when we started, like we were probably going out 2 or 3 nights a week, and we did get some good friends out of that, but the business just stayed still, right? We didn't really make any sales during that time. And
you found you would often see the same people at these events, and there are a lot of people, maybe because of things like the social network and such, there are a lot of people that like to say they're a startup or an entrepreneur.
Pet rock
and
companies.
yes, they have a pet rock project. They love to do everything there is about their startup except for actually do anything with their startup. They like to go to events and drink some lawyer's free wine and beer in a skyscraper in Atlanta, and then talk about their idea to synergize social mobile play.
It's gonna be huge.
It's going to be huge, for kids. And don't get me wrong. I mean, maybe there's some really amazing way to synergize mobility for the kids.
In the cloud.
In the cloud.
Over Twitter.
Over Twitter. Oh, well, it's gotta use OAuth and Ruby. And Node. Fucking Node.js. Anyway. So, there's lots of folks there that, they just want to talk about it. They don't want to actually do anything. And like Mark said, it's easy to get sucked up into these events and just go to them and not actually make progress. And this really is a more specific example of a much broader concept, which is just in general with time. When you're running a startup, you are going to have, in any given day, 20 things you've got to do? 20 things if it's a good day. And it gets back to that whole, it's not engineering. It's not, I got to fix this bug. It's like, no, I need to go put, our dinner write down that we just, spent some money out of the Zumpf corporate credit card to get lunch. So that way, when we're doing, doing bookkeeping in Quicken, which Mark can tell you all about QuickBooks, that we can balance this and we know where our money's going, right? It's I need to spend 5 minutes and email this dude in the UK because it's Wednesday night or it's Thursday night, and I have to get this to him because by the time I wake up, it's already noon in the UK. And so I need to do this now, so he'll see it in the morning, so he'll maybe respond so that I can start this RFP thing. That'll take, however long. But if you don't write that email today, you just push this thing back, at least 3 or 4 business days, because you're gonna get to it by Friday. Well, crap, he's not gonna see that thing till Monday. So you have all these little things that need to happen. And what you have to do is figure out, and you have to be ruthless in your prioritization. Like, number one, is this activity going to get me money? Not, and you could say, oh, building my product, that'll get me money. No, seriously, like, if I complete this task, will there be money in my bank account? If you have any tasks for which the answer to that question is yes, you should be doing that task right now, to the detriment of everything else. Because when you're starting this thing, you need to keep cash flow up. It's your lifeblood. And so you need to be ruthless in how you're using your time. The final thing I wanted to say on this actually is a great example of this. I've talked about it at previous conferences too, is day-to-day maintenance tasks, right? It has never been cheaper to run a company and start a startup. A good one I like to say is email. I have friends who are IT guys, and they love to manage servers and set up, Spam Assassin and build all this infrastructure and do it. And it's like, you're retarded, because you're spending an hour a month on that. In a year, that's basically, if depending on what your hourly rate is, let's say your hourly rate is $50, which is not that large of an hourly rate. That you just spent $600 of your time. You can go to Google Apps for your domain. Well, you can give your email to the NSA too, but you go to Google Apps for your domain and spend $60 per user per year. Done. Never have to worry about it. It's going to work on my iPhone. It's going to be backed up. You're not going to have spam. Screw that. I don't care if you love to administer email boxes. You are stupid if you do it yourself, unless you can do it in about 3 minutes a month, which you probably can.
And Billy,
Yeah.
if you pay it per year, it's $50.
Oh, if you prepay?
Yeah,
Nice.
$5 a month or $50 a year.
So it's not just about the task you're doing for your business. It's also about where you choose to spend your time to actually kind of like maintain the business.
Yeah, and it's funny, the prepay for a year just made me think, we don't have a slide on this, but cash flow is another key part of the company, especially in the early days. You may need to make somewhat unsound financial decisions to stretch out that checkbook a little bit longer too. So like, we're gonna pay more in the long run, but we really need this money in the bank right now. So there's sometimes those considerations as well. So how many people here have sold something like over the phone or actually been on a sales call? A lot more than I thought. How many people do it for a living? Wow, hats off to you, right? I had never sold anything. So in all my prior jobs, and I think most of the people here, customers were the annoying people who brought you support tickets and features you had to build and work, right?
And sales were these assholes that made a bunch of money that got to come into the office whenever they wanted to. They're like, why are they paying that guy? I don't understand.
Yeah, they're the ones who had fun in college, right?
Yes, exactly.
And now they're suffering through a sales job, right? Well, boy, was that an eye-opener when I joined. So that, if I had one lesson I think I've learned over the last 9 months more than anything else, is I wildly underestimated the amount of time I'd spend on sales. I mean, I knew I would have to do it, right? You can't not do it in a startup, but wow, it's probably 80% of my time, I would say.
Goodness.
And that was a surprise to me, and I was bad. I'm still bad, right? But I was really bad, and I'm sure I never was as sleazy as the used car salesman, but I sure felt that way, right? And a lot of the emails I would send out, I was like, hey, do you want to buy our product? We have all these features. It's great, right?
Which is the absolute, that is not how you sell a product at all. I literally, when I started Zumpf, and I had somebody email me, and they were a kind of what we call a user buyer. So there are lots of people that kind of sign off when they're buying something. This would be the person who's going to use the product on the day-to-day. He does not have any economic authority. He cannot approve a purchase, anything like that. You typically get a lot of emails from user buyers because they're the frontline people looking for new stuff to make their job easier. And I'd get this email from somebody, and they'd be at like a larger e-commerce site. They'd be like, hey, I really like this. This sounds cool. I'd be like, okay, well, you can send a check to blah, blah. Like, I literally thought that was sales. And it never worked. And I'm like, oh, man, this is hard work. So, yeah, it's, this actually is a good thing of don't try to do this yourself, right? I did it for myself for a couple years, and that was a mistake. Get a founder, but both Mark and I have technical backgrounds. And so, go out to your network, go out to friends, go out to other people who have started companies and talk to them and pick their brain and ask them this stuff because, oh my God, you are gonna need help. And we lucked out and had some good sales mentors and helped us completely turn this thing around, which was amazing.
It surprised me there's a lot more science to selling than I thought, right? I think the naive approach is it's just a good old boy network, and it's sleazy and you try to trick people into doing things, but there's actually a lot of great books. We've read a lot. We've heard a lot from mentors as well about just the art of advancing, the art of the ask. Whenever you're in a call, you want to ask them to do something to show commitment, moving it along the way, especially for enterprise sales, which is what we do, right? You want them to have an involvement, an emotional stake in it, give you something back. You want to ask them to do something, and every call should be moving the relationship forward. If they say, send me your literature, I'll get back to you, then you're in the spiral of death at that point, right? Because they're blowing you off at that point. So we've learned a lot. There's a lot of tactics that we're good and bad at, right? I think we're still kind of primitive in some ways, right? I still feel like sometimes that like the TV stereotype where you have like a little microphone in your ear and someone's talking the answers to you, and we're on a call and the customer says like, I'd like a demo, and you're like, looking at your spreadsheets like, okay, when they ask for demos, say this, right?
We literally do have, not scripts, but it's like, it's what's called the selling process or your different stages. And we actually push back. That was one of the things we used to do. Great example. I don't know when we started. Whatever, we'll figure this out. We had somebody call and they'd be like, hey, I'd like a demo. And before it'd be like, heck yeah, let's do a demo, awesome.
Yeah.
Stupidest thing you can possibly do. You don't know what their problem is. People don't buy products because they like to buy products. Nobody's like, man, I really wish I had another Node.js-powered mobile synergizing connecting thing.
For the cloud.
No, yeah, they're for the cloud, for the kids. They're doing that because they're solving a problem. What's their problem? Why does the other stuff out there not work? How are they doing this now? Like, what are they trying to solve? And then all of your conversations about them as you're talking to them and then going to the demo and everything, it's not about, hey, here's how Zoomp is awesome. It's, hey, Steve, remember when we first talked and you told me you were having a problem prioritizing performance issues with your regular functional defects? I'm going to show you a feature I think that's going to help you do that. Blah, 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 blah. How do you see yourself using that? How do you think, or how would that help you accomplish what you're trying to do? And you get them thinking about not, I want to buy some software, it's how is this software going to make my life not suck? And so, there are literally entire books about sales, conferences about sales. We can't possibly educate you in 3 minutes, and we absolutely are not the people you want educating you about that. That's like the 5-year-old teaching the 4-year-old math. Like, there's not that much that 5-year-old can teach them. So, anyway, but it's sales, you can't underestimate how tricky it is. So if you don't understand it, find somebody who does and talk to them a lot.
And that's been an early priority for us. One of the startup founders' dilemmas is you have to sell to get enough runway to hire someone to sell, right? And we're lucky in that we just got to that runway where we could hire someone to help us sell. But you never get out of the sales process, right? It's actually good to be in the sales process because you want to know what your customers are thinking, what feedback they have, what features are working and what aren't. So, any founder would say like, oh, good, I don't have to worry about talking to customers anymore. I would be very skeptical that their company's going to survive long term. But we've recently hired a salesperson full time who's given us a lot of great insight as well, which has been I think a nice win for us, and hopefully build some momentum on that.
And this is kind of an aside. We're a B2C company, or excuse me, B2B. No, God, no. You don't want to be in B2C. B2B, you're selling to businesses to solve problems. Selling to customers is a totally different set. Totally different, and usually it's a get big and then figure out how to monetize it, which I've always thought is kind of silly.
Collect
but
underpants.
Collect underpants.
Isn't that what caused the dot-com bubble to burst, though, is that it was just rampant spending?
That's a very that's
Bad
similar.
business plans,
Yeah, that's kind of a very simple way of putting it. But yes, the idea of I don't know what this is worth, but if I have a lot of it, it must be worth something. that is
Well,
not
especially a lot of
necessarily true.
B2Cs, you have to have critical mass to really be successful, right? You have to have a lot of users to attract the merchants, and you have to have a lot of merchants to attract the users, and those sorts of virtuous cycles. And you have to have a lot of capital to get you to that stage. And one of the great benefits of a B2B model like us is we don't have to have that critical mass to succeed. And we're already cash flow positive, and like I said earlier, we're not living the large life by any measure, but
Which we will talk
we're
about.
self-sustaining and we're bootstrapped, right? And that's nice to be able to have that discipline and to grow in a sustained, controlled manner as well.
Yep, it also means that you don't have to answer really to anybody, which is nice, other than
Very
yourselves, which you'll do every morning when you look in the mirror. You'll be like, oh, we'll talk about
Well, that's
that.
a good segue to this,
Yeah.
this slide right here, right? So you're your own boss, right? And that's obviously the American dream, but man, is it stressful too. And I've learned this the hard way. It's like, oh my God, there's so many things I should be doing right now that I just don't have time to do. It's like we've talked about using marketing automation software to have drip campaigns, where you can email customers at regular intervals in different email templates based on where they are in the sales process. Like, that would be awesome. I have no time to do this, right? when am I going to even remotely think about doing this? We write a lot of blog content to get inbound leads and attention to our product. Writing good quality blog content takes time, and you have 18 other things to do. So it's you can get overwhelmed pretty easily, and an emotional shield you have to put up, and I know I've had to put up, and you have to as well, is you just can't get down on yourself that you didn't get it all done. And I think we've actually had a pretty good cadence. The stereotype is startups, you're working 80-hour weeks, and we certainly don't work 40-hour weeks, but I don't work 80-hour weeks either. I think you have to have a long-term sustainable mentality to this, or you're just going to burn out. And,
You will. You'll flame out. And being your own boss sounds fantastic, but I'll step back and I would submit to you that, the majority of Americans are obese. They're their own boss over what they eat, and they eat crap, right? Like, what that teaches you is that you will do what you want to do, not necessarily what you should do. And
So what you're saying is, if you're your own boss,
You'll be
have
fit.
the suckiest boss ever.
yes,
That's right.
I went out and hired a boss.
Yeah.
Because I was really bad at being my own boss. No, I did. I have told Mark will absolutely agree. I have told Mark many times, like, Mark, you are allowed to kick my ass. Like, if I am not doing something that I should be doing, go with it. Now, Mark is, I am a much more animated and profanity-laden individual than Mark is, so Mark's encouragement is a little more subtle than mine. Which also means this is yet another reason why I am not a very good boss.
So, Billy, when you said "fuck you" to the customer, let's just phrase that. Let's try harder next time.
Yes, I've never said "fuck you" to a customer. Not anybody who's still a customer. How about that?
Right.
So being your own boss, it is a blessing and a curse. And we got back to that earlier. Like you have 20 things, and you need to make a little progress on all of them. As a nerd and a hacker, there is nothing that I love more than to deep dive on a project or a specific problem. And I can't do that, right? You can't say, I'm going to take the next 2 days and do X. Because you can't. You have these other things. And when there's nobody there with you, this gets back to always have a co-founder. Or have somebody you bring in pretty much immediately to help with. Because when you're your own boss, you do the things that you want to do, not necessarily the things that you should do, and it's ultimately to the detriment. So, when I brought Mark on, we suddenly became a lot more productive than, it wasn't 2x, it was, 2.5 or 3x, because not only were we both doing more work, but we were doing the right work.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder. And you can challenge each other on that too. Like, this is a great feature, but do
Yeah.
we need this right now? Is this going to help us close more deals right now? We want this platform to be scalable, and we want to be able to architect it out to 100 nodes, but right now we have 10 customers. So let's work on getting 12 customers
Right.
first, and then we'll put the high availability in at that point. So engineer anti-pattern, I definitely fit into this, right? Engineers, the stereotype is engineers are introverts and wallflowers, and I definitely fall in. Billy's actually, I think, quite an extrovert, but he goes out of the mold, but I feel like I'm very much an introvert, and you cannot succeed by being an introvert. You have to get out and meet people, and you have to get out of your comfort zone, and you might be something good on TV that night, but you have to go out and go to these networking events and meet people, even though you want to stay home and watch Battlestar Galactica, right? And you just got to break out of that comfort zone. You got to be comfortable with asking people for things,
That's weird.
introductions, which I had a hard time with, right? It's like, he's my friend. I don't want to ask him for an introduction to the CTO. He's going to think I'm some slimeball by doing that, but if you get an honest, real conversation with people, people like to help each other out, right? They don't see it as, if you legitimately are coming as an honest person, they don't see it as a sleazy thing. They want to help you and you want to help them. And that's something I know I had to overcome, right? And to get to that level of comfort. 25 minutes. So I swear that we will get to some positives here in a second, because I was putting the slides together the other night. I was like,
Don't worry.
This is a really depressing talk.
We're getting there. Again, we told you we'd tell you what that question mark is, and it's not always pretty. But yeah, we'll come out the other side being okay. One of the big things that happens when you go to doing a startup is, and this is just more of like a psychological thing you need to be okay with, you will not be like the big breadwinner. You will not be going on amazing vacations. You will not be doing anything. You will be paying yourself significantly fractions of what you made before, because you're trying to keep this alive. Even if you take funding, it's not like, oh, we got $1 million in funding, I'm gonna pay myself $200,000. It's like, no, you're gonna pay yourself, $30,000, and you're gonna use that other to do a marketing campaign, or, hire a designer, or, so you just accept that you will not be necessarily have as much disposable income as you did before. This is actually kind of a relief. You kind of learn to appreciate what you have. But it certainly is kind of shocking when you look in your bank account and you're like, wow, okay. Even when you're starting the company and you're looking at this much earlier on when cash flow is an issue, and you're like, I need to make a sale because in 2 months I cannot pay my mortgage. So, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this over breakfast earlier too, and I made the joke that I actually own 2 houses right now. I own the house that I live in and the house that I'm paying Blue Cross Blue Shield for insurance every month. Hope you're watching. So it's painful, right? You're paying your own benefits, your own insurance. You have a very flat, if not slightly negative burn in your day-to-day. So you really have to be a believer, right? And meanwhile, your friends are going on great trips, and you go out to restaurants. You're like, oh, let's have another appetizer, and you're like, how much does that cost? And you're watching it's quite.
And they're like, oh, we'll just split it, and it's like you're looking at this.
I had one bite.
I had the $11 chicken, and you had the New York strip, but okay.
So it takes some adjustment, right, and sacrifice, but it's worth it in some cases.
Yep.
But you do question your sanity. I mean, when things go rough, you're like, why am I doing this? I'm working twice as hard for half the money, and there's no end in sight right now. So you really have to be a true believer to get into that.
We'll get to the happy stuff, I swear.
I'm gonna start crying. Does anyone have a tissue?
We're close. Let's
I quit.
These we can kind of go kind of quick through. The playing well with others. I didn't know what you wanted to say on that.
What do you mean by that, Billy?
We'll talk about this later, not in front of the kids.
No, it's so here, I don't know why I use this analogy, because I don't watch sports at all, but I always use the baseball analogy, because every now and then I guess I've gone to a game and see people hit some ball with a stick, right? And Billy doesn't watch baseball either, but the analogy, you don't want your star pitcher to be your star hitter, right? Because people have different skills that they're good at, and something I've learned over my career is trying to change people into something they're not is just pushing a boulder up a hill, right? You're a team, and playing off each other's strengths is the more effective way of doing that. And like Billy and I have a great rapport, for example, where he's very good at the technical deep dive, I'm very good on the operational aspects of the business, and together we play to our strengths, and we're stronger. That's why we're at 2.5x, right? Because we're able to complement each other. So that's another piece of good advice to get a co-founder, not try to do it yourself, because no matter how good you are, you're going to suck at something, right? And having someone who helps fill in those gaps, and then over time as you grow the team, having multiple people fill in those gaps and not try to fit square pegs into round holes is just really a winning strategy, in my opinion.
And so, and this actually is a pretty good thing to mention. So, Mark and I get along really well, but we've gotten like one bad argument. I mean, not bad, like we immediately patched it up. But Mark was writing a blog post, and I'm like, no, this isn't right, or no. Well, it was that or some software. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but basically Mark was doing something, and I'm like, that is not how I would do it. That's not as good. Not necessarily as good, but that is not what I would have done. You should change it. And Mark pushed back, to his credit, and he's like, look, are you getting upset with me because I did it wrong, or are you getting upset with me because it's different? Because if you're getting upset with me because it's wrong, that's valid, and let's fix this. But if you're getting mad at me just because it's different, as long as it's accomplishing the same thing, who the hell cares? And that was a very difficult thing for me to come to terms with, but it absolutely is essential because you need to rely on the people you're playing with. You cannot do it all yourself. I went to Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech had a number of CS introduction computer science classes. And when you get to your sophomore year, they start giving you projects. You have to do them in teams of 4. The projects are so large, it is impossible for one person to do it. And they deliberately design them this way because even if you get 4 mediocre people who can work well together, they will do better than the team that consists of the, genius guy who's also kind of a dick to everybody, and the team that doesn't want to work with him. So being able to understand that you need to work with other people and that different isn't bad is critical for getting any type of work done.
Well said, Billy.
Thank you.
High five.
High five.
Go team.
Go team. Go team Zoof.
Group hug, everyone.
Group hug.
Everyone up here, come on. Beware hidden agendas, right? So
Yes.
this is definitely
This-
a through
this
the
is why-
trenches experience.
This is why nobody from the Atlanta startup scene, like the founders will like to watch this, but all the service people around the
Yeah.
startup scenes would not like this part.
This is maybe my, I don't know, seeing the positive in people, naivete, right? But we went to a lot of events and met a lot of people, and I was telling Bill, I was like, wow, everyone's so nice. They're giving us like this great feedback, and they're buying us lunch, and this is nice. These are good people, right? And then you discover, like, when you're about 3/4 of the way through the lunch or the conversation, like, they pivot it much more cleverly than we could into a sales thing. It's like, so, can we set up a call next week? And I'm like, whoa, I thought you were giving us some advice. This is a sales thing? And we were actually, Billy and I were on a call with this one guy once, and I'm not going to mention names because it's being filmed and he might watch it, who knows, but we were chatting through IM. We were on different locations, and we were on the call, and he was just giving us a lot of great advice. I'm like, oh, thank you. It's really helpful. And then he did a really masterful pivot into a sale. And then we sent each other. I was like, he's selling us. Wait, how did this happen?
And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, people, there's the golden rule, do unto others as they want to do unto you. I like to I believe in what's called the tarnished rule, which is people will help you, will continue to help you because it's in their best interest to do so. When I started Zoof, I had a lot of great people who helped me, and I gave them nothing in return. They were my friends, and they were happy to do it. And in many ways, I used their help too much, and it upset them. And I understood that, and that was regrettable. But one of the things you learn is that they're helping me because they're my friends, but that's not a sustainable strategy, right? Like, they will not continue to help me 18 months from now when they have their regular job and their kids and all the stuff they're doing because they like me, right? There's a finite limit to that. So what you want to do is find folks that it's what they call a win-win, right? That term gets overused a lot, but us working with you has a net positive for you, and you working with us has a net positive for us. And as long as you can understand what people are trying to accomplish and beware those hidden agendas where they're just trying to get something for them and not necessarily help you, that can cut through a lot of BS. And there's a lot of people, we talked to, I won't mention it, but we were dealing with one of the people that works with us that we employ to do certain stuff. And they're always encouraging us to go raise money or do different types of activities. And that would be helpful potentially for us. It's helpful for a lot of companies, but it really benefits them because they're a service provider and they're going to get a really big cut of us raising that money. And so it's kind of like, well, I appreciate you telling me this, but are you telling me this because you're going to get a really big cut, or are you telling me this because you think it'll help us? Because we just laid out the case on why we actually don't think that'll help us right now. And you're pushing us towards this, that's a hidden agenda.
And there is definitely some good advice out there too. There are some people we've talked with who have been great mentors, right? So I don't want to scare you guys off, everyone you would possibly talk to, but I would say hands down the best advice we've gotten is from fellow entrepreneurs because they don't have a skin in your game, right?
Right.
They've been through it. They have appreciated the goodwill they've gotten and advice they've gotten along the way, and they give back to you as well. We've had some great talks with fellow entrepreneurs in Atlanta, and Atlanta's got a great startup ecosystem, and we've learned so much through that I think that's hands down the best way to go is just talk to other entrepreneurs, and they're really generous usually and not self-serving in any way.
And they also can give you a pretty good idea of, as you uncover people that are just trying to use you, you share it with your fellow entrepreneurs and startup owners. And as they find the people, they share you. So you know, the Atlanta startup scene, I don't want to make it sound like it's bad or toxic or anything like that. Far from it. It's fantastic. It's probably one of the better ones you can get outside of New York or, say, you know, the Bay Area or Seattle. But you know, it's just, you know, understand what's there, be cognizant of it. And actually, a lot of the events, there's one in particular, Startup Riot in Atlanta, which is really cool. You can go and pitch. Sanjay does it. Hopefully, he'll see us talking about this and remember how nice we are.
Do you want to plug his hashtag?
I would service him right now if I could. Actually, no, I'm kidding.
We just lost 10% of our viewers.
We
now.
did. But he has a strict policy about vendors and service providers can't come to his events because that's like sharks in a small little pond with a bunch of chum. You know, I'm 20 and I have an idea to synergize mobilistic Node.js for the kids, blah, blah, blah.
In the cloud.
Shark on them, like, right, it's crazy. So, you know, there are some things that kind of protect you from that. We don't want to make this sound bad, but just be aware. There are people out there that are in it for them, not you, and try to avoid those people.
We got 15 minutes.
We can get to the happy stuff.
Yeah. So this is a great quote Billy had a couple months ago, I think. If you're not a manic depressive before starting a company, you will be, right? And it's so true. I mean, because I don't think I was a manic depressive before, and I think I am now, right? You know, it's you have weeks where you're like, why am I doing this, right? And this is terrible. We had I think 2.5 months where we didn't make a single sale. Right? Like, oh God, this is just not working. And then you have weeks, like a few weeks ago, we had weeks where we had a call with Target, and we had a couple other great demos, and we closed a deal, and like, oh
We
my
closed
God,
3
high
deals.
five, you know, they're gonna make a social network movie about us, right? And then
Yes.
the next week, nobody answers your calls, and you know, your emails are getting dropped. It's like, oh, this sucks. So it's highs and lows, man, and the highs are really high, and the lows are really lows, and you got to be comfortable with that, and more importantly, you do not take that out on your spouse or your friends, or you got to learn to have an outlet. And I think
It's true.
My outlet's going to the gym and working out. I think yours is drinking Red Bull and driving fast. I'm not sure.
I play a
Play
lot
video
of Call
games.
of Duty Modern Warfare. And I name the little 13-year-olds that are shooting me or that I'm shooting them after our particular problem prospects. No, I'm kidding. I would never shoot a prospect. Actually, sounds horrible. No, let me be very clear. That's not a joke. That's really bad. Unfortunately, in this day and age, you cannot say things like that. So the glass is always half full, right? Technically, it really is, right? If you count air, because air's there. It's good, and there's a lot of fantastic things about doing a startup, right? Like we spent a lot kind of scaring you and talking about the challenges and the difficulties, but you know, I think it's a net positive, and we're going to kind of walk you through why we think that.
I probably should have put a quote up here, but I've said to Billy many times, I've learned more in the last 9 months than I think the last 5 years of my career, and actually very little of it was engineering, right? And that's where most of my career's been in the past, but I'm considerably better at sales than I was before. I still suck, but you know, from 1 to 10, I'm now 3 instead of a 1, so that's progress. I know way more about QuickBooks than I ever really wanted to, but we've also, so I'm really proud of a lot of things. We've gotten, this sounds scary, but remember it's a startup. We've gotten a version control system in place. We've got a defect tracking system in place. We have a wiki to share things. We have a new database platform.
Yep.
We have multiple EC2 instances running.
We put monitors up.
We
Mark
have
used to just be like,
monitoring.
he'd be like, "Hey, I think this is down." I'd be like, "Oh, it is?" And he's like, "Don't you have like monitors in place?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, "I'm gonna fix that right now."
Yeah, I'm going to code some monitors right now. So it's, you know, when you go into an established company, hopefully these processes already exist, right? And you have these best practices from your experience. But when you're starting from scratch, there's not a setup.exe that you can run that will give you all of this, right? You know, you need to build this out yourself. And I think putting all that infrastructure in place to grow while still using your time wisely, right? You know, and balancing it is very gratifying, and you learn a lot along the way. You learn a lot of new technologies, and that's and even worst case, you know, and I'm not saying worst case, but even if your startup doesn't go anywhere, you've learned skills that are extremely marketable in your next gig as well. So something to think about on that.
Exactly. You almost should look at doing a startup as an opportunity to do things you can't do in your career, right? Like, I mean, if you're a QA guy or a developer, or God forbid you call yourself a software architect, right? Like you have a very limited, your days are probably half a dozen things that you just do ad nauseum, right? And when you're doing a startup, you can You can try your hand at everything. You will find that you really suck at all of them. You will get better, but it's really an opportunity for growth. And you're gonna fail, but you're gonna get better. You're gonna pick yourself up, and you're gonna learn how to do it better next time. You won't go, oh, thank you, person who's interested in my product. Please send me a check. And you start to learn a little bit more, and then you kind of learn about procurement and getting paid 45 days after you bill them, and all sorts of stuff like that.
Collections, that's fun too. The tools, yes. So I think we all know this pretty well, right? But here's where the cloud term is so overused, and we all know that. But here's where it actually is very applicable, right? There's so many great cloud-based tools out there now to help you, and they're so cheap, right? You know, our burn is super low because most of our tools are either free or $5 a month or $10 a month, or our biggest non-personnel expense is EC2 hosting, which is just like, I think, $400 a month that we're paying right now. It's the cheapest it's ever been to start a pure virtual company, right, without a physical product. And it's only getting cheaper, right? And then these tools are self-explanatory. They're excellent in many cases, right? And they're fun to learn. You know, you learn all these new technologies, all these things that you had to install yourself and maintain, like Billy was talking about earlier, you don't have to worry about anymore. You know, we can get new employees up and running in minutes, you know, through all the provisioning of all of this. So the tools are really fun, you know, and very powerful.
And a lot of the tools, the best part is that it's not, I mean, arguably a one-use server is a tool, yeah, but it's a tool that's gonna cost you, $3 or $4 grand, and you're gonna depreciate it over multiple years. You know, you use EC2, a lot of people talk about EC2 is not cost effective. Well, when it's you and only you, and you're starting, and you don't have to go spend several $1,000s on a server, yes, it is very cost effective. You know, over the course of several years, could you probably have saved money by just buying a system? Yeah, probably. But if you're still around in 3 years, go you. Level up. You're doing good. Realizing that you could have saved $300 if you had only just thrown a couple $1,000s at a problem 3 years ago, that is a good problem to have, right? I will eat that $300 any day of the week. So what we want to do is say that these tools are awesome, and they let you try. They let you experiment. You know, Amazon even has a free tier for spinning up very small instances, right? There's no reason you shouldn't start trying some of this in your off hours, because it doesn't take a lot of capital. It typically just takes time. And if you're bored at work and you're looking for something new, you probably would like to spend your time in other ways anyway. So.
Every sale, yeah. So there's no, it's your first kill. I almost had this image of putting like like speared boar in this picture or something, but I thought that might be too offensive. But it is like your first kill, your first sale, and
Learning all sorts of things about Mark. I never thought I would. It's
you
like
stab
Dexter
it
over
again
here.
and again and again. But
Are you a blood splatter expert?
right. But it is very gratifying, and especially when you are looking at the business checking account and you're watching what's going in and what's going out, and when you see money come in, that's the best feeling in the world. Even when we get excited over $300 sales.
Yeah. We're like, that's awesome.
I was like, wow, there's some money coming in. This is great, you know. And in prior jobs, you know, we would be extremely angry at the sales staff if they closed a $300 deal, right? But it was your baby, and you're paying the bills.
It's reoccurring, by the way. It's not just a
right.
But yes.
When you see that number going up and down, right? You know, it's very gratifying, and it's a good experience. And I think it's like you see your baby just growing up and doing its first.
Mark can't oversell this, right? There's nothing like saying, there used to be nothing there, and then I did this thing, and then there's something there. That's amazing, right? That's why people write software. That's why people, build, that's why people have 3D printers. That's why people build this stuff. That's what drives me as a person. I love creating things. And I have been able to find that same level of joy in creating a software, in creating a business. And I never thought that would be possible. And the thing that you learn is that this also, we talked about expectations earlier. Success is not the social network. Yes, that is success. But, literally there's, how many millions of companies in the world? That is not what's going to happen to you. If it is, amazing, thanks. Remember I gave you an inspirational talk?
Let's talk.
Take me out so I'm not eating $11 chicken dinners. And, but the definition of success, a lot of people get hung up with this in the startup scene, especially when you start going out to networking events. It's like, oh, did you hear these guys? They came in and they flipped this thing. They made 11 million and blah, blah, blah. awesome, great job. But who here's ever heard of 37 Signals? They do Campfire, Basecamp, High Rise, all this great stuff. They had a blog post a while ago, and where they talked about this, and they said, look, success is that you have a business that you created, that employs people, that makes money, and you get to do what you want to do within all having to do all the stuff you don't want to do as well. But you're doing that, like you built that. That is a success. Everything else on top of it is gravy. And set your expectations accordingly. You know, I think my net happiness is higher than when I was making literally about 5 times what I'm making now. But my happiness right now, I think, is overall happier. Because of what I'm doing, it challenges me in new ways. So don't think that if you do a startup and you're not like getting acquired by some giant megalith corporation in 3 years, you somehow failed. You know, make your expectations about success reasonable, and it's like how girls apparently, and as they grow up, they're like presented by supermodels and, you know, plastic surgery, and they have like it distorts their image of what they should be. I think a lot, like if you're reading TechCrunch every day, yeah, that's great, but that's distorting your vision about what a startup is, because you don't read about all the startups that fail. You only read about the startups that succeed. So, you know, just, you know, be wary, or not wary, but just be realistic.
Also, like, here's my Yay America speech, right? You know, and I'm not political in any way, but I like that we have a culture where startup failure is not deemed some sort of bad thing, right? You know, in many ways it's respected. Like, hey, you had some guts and you tried something, and yeah, it didn't work out, but I like that sort of mentality. I like that you took a risk and you tried something, and you did your best, and you probably learned from it, and you may have done it again or taken those skills elsewhere, right? So that's a lot of what motivated me to come on to join Billy, was that I felt like if I didn't try, I would have hated myself for not trying. Even if it failed, at least I tried and I learned something from it. And my goal, like Billy said, my goal was not to make millions of dollars. That's not realistic. My goal was to have a job in a year. And then my goal for the next year was to have a job that I could live off of for a year. And
Pay a little more.
Yeah, so I think if you set a realistic bar, you're not going to be disappointed when you're not bought out for $1 billion because your Twitter feed's in the cloud for children. Okay, we got 3 minutes.
Yep. So flexibility is nice. This is a huge part of doing a startup. You know, for you know, me to, you know, Mark, the way he deals with stress is he goes and works out every day, and that's what happens when you get old, I guess. So, but he can do that, and he'll just be like, hey, I gotta take kind of a longer lunch. I got this, you know, doctor's appointment, but then I think I was gonna go work out. I'm like, Mark, go. I don't care. Just fine. I'll talk to you in 3 hours. And I think my impression was it took you a little while to get used to that like it's okay for us to be able to be flexible. Yeah. You know, and you know, Mark had a baby. I'm expecting a baby in the spring, and you know, Mark's like, oh, hey, I'm gonna kind of be working late, not so much during the day, because you know, my wife's doing these things. I need to watch the baby. And it's like, no problem. That's one of the awesome things about doing a startup, is that, you know, you are your own boss. You need to drive yourself, but you also have the flexibility to work around kind of life's little funness.
Absolutely. I've actually yet to work in a coffee shop. I always thought I would be like on my laptop in Starbucks or something. But
that sucks. You will not do that.
I've actually never done that.
No.
Maybe I should. I'm more of a Panera worker.
Every
than a
time I
coffee
try
shop
to do
worker.
that, I'm just reading the news or looking at oatmeal comics.
You work with the best, you know, and you have to, right? You know, when you're a small startup, you can't afford to have a mediocre employee, right? You know, you're going to go out of business if you do. And generally, mediocre non-go-getters aren't really attracted to the startup lifestyle. I mean, if they are, I'd check their sanity, right? Because you can't not work hard and be fulfilled by what you're learning and be successful in a startup.
We're kind of making it sound like we're lazy. We're not lazy. No, not at all. We work really freaking hard. But having people that are willing to say, that don't treat this as a 9 to 5. They don't treat it as a, oh my God, I'm gonna work 100-hour weeks and kill myself. I mean, we do work crazy weeks sometimes when we're pushing something out. But you know, working with the best and making sure that you have people that you can depend on and rely on is critical, because it won't work otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it's something you take for granted, right? And I started out my career, I don't want to name names, but let's just say it's a big, large computer company that has 3 letters and it's blue. And I lasted a year there because I felt like I was on a team of 10 and I was doing probably 80% of the work, and there was these people who I knew were making 5 times my salary who who were just kind of phoning it in, and that just drove me nuts. And I had to work for a startup after that because I just couldn't respect who I was working with. And ever since then, I've been working for startups, and I've had a much higher percentage. There's still, where you work, there's always some people you don't respect less than others, right? But you get spoiled, right? You get spoiled with working with good people in startups, and you kind of accept that. You have this little, twisted version of the world that you live in, that everyone's always that good, and then you go and talk to people who live in corporate America who have some people that they're complaining about sometimes, right? It's like, oh, that's right, I don't have to deal with that.
That is a nice thing, and it's as you can kind of watch your company grow, it's pretty impressive. But you can accelerate this growth. I mean, I worked at a HP. I'll even say it. I don't really care. And I was always amazed at how long things took, how many people had a say. And I'm like, why the hell are we talking to that guy? We are asking his opinion because we want him to feel good that we consulted him. Screw him. We are not in the business of making sure he feels good about himself. We're in the business of making this awesome. That doesn't mean you're a jerk, but it just means that, you have to do all these things you don't want to do. And being able to work with high caliber people in a small environment where everyone's united, it's a fantastic experience.
It's funny because I'm the anal operational guy of the company. I've got 5 seconds left.
You have to show
And we
that
made it
last
to the
slide.
end. Oh, yeah. I'm like, Billy, we got to speed up the slide. We've got 5 minutes.
See, I needed somebody to be the boss of my presentation. Help me out. Otherwise, I'd be telling you silly stories back on slide 7, and then I'd talk really fast. It wouldn't really work.
So I don't know if we have time for Q&A at all, or
Nope, they pretty much kick us off. All right, you can come find us afterwards. Thanks.
All right, thank you, everyone.
See, I knew this is about the problem I was expecting. Maybe some more. Yeah, that was kind of annoying to start, but
It filled in a little. Yeah. I think it's the time slot.
I think so too.